Hello guys and welcome back to a brand new video and welcome back to another edition of the WWE 2K20 wishlist. Today's video is brought to you by this comment which suggested I do a video about an NXT Evolution Showcase in WWE 2K20. I'm sorry it's taken me like 5 episodes to finally get to comment suggested by you guys. I'm kind of going to be trying to mix it up a little bit now, where like one week it's a suggestion from me, another week it's a suggestion from the comment, and then the next week, you know, we'll just go vice versa. And then even some weeks like it might overlap, like for example this week is the first time I'm doing one suggested by the comments, but this is also something that I've been thinking about as well, so you know it'll overlap in certain points. And I'm sorry this one took me a little bit longer to get out. I had to think a lot about this one because obviously it's a showcase mode and I'm going to be talking about the showcase from beginning till end, so it's going to be a long one. Get ready because it's going to be a good episode. But yeah, this is the last episode of the wishlist before Christmas. I'm excited, dude. And I guess while I have your attention at the beginning of this video, I do want to say I'm doing a little Christmas Q&A, probably going to be uploading it on Christmas Eve, so be sure to leave Q&A questions down in the comments below. It can be anything, you can ask as many as you want. Throw in a couple Christmas questions as well, you know, just because it's the theme, but you don't necessarily have to. On today's wishlist, as I mentioned earlier, is an NXT Evolution Showcase. A showcase which would take you from the beginning of NXT and it'd take you through the rise of the hottest brand in sports entertainment today. So what I've gone and done here is I've picked a few matches from each NXT year, maybe like 1 to 8 matches depending on what year it is, and why I think those matches would be perfect to show the evolution of NXT in a showcase. So of course the origins, the proper origins of NXT started off back in 2010, February, when it was just a game show. Now, as much as 10-year-old me really enjoyed game show NXT because hey, it's wrestling and it's a game show, I don't necessarily think they'd have like a roll the barrel around the ring match, although it would be pretty cool. I think they can just tell this in the video package that opens up, because it really isn't necessary in telling the NXT story besides saying what it was originally. Because whilst on the original NXT we had a match like Jericho versus Daniel Bryan in 2010 that was relevant to the career of Daniel Bryan, it isn't really relevant or significant to the overall NXT brand. So we'll skip ahead to 2012. Jinder Mahal versus Seth Rollins for the NXT Championship, the inaugural NXT Champion. And what a different universe we'd be living in if it was Jinder Mahal to win the NXT title. I mean, honestly, that would be very weird if he was the first NXT Champion. I mean, but anyway, this is where I would start for an NXT Evolution Showcase as far as matches goes. It perfectly shows the start of NXT. It starts where the first champion was crowned in August 2012, and you know, we could have different challenges in this match and different cutscenes that could unlock a retro FCW arena, because you know, FCW is where a lot of the guys that are on top today started. It was NXT before NXT was NXT down in Orlando, and then we could unlock like a new Dusty attire, a retro Jinder, a retro Seth with those tights. And really this is the only match I went and picked from 2012, because whilst we could do other matches like, you know, the origins of certain superstars like Liaki aka Roman Reigns, I feel like that's probably more relevant to a future Roman Reigns showcase rather than showing the origins of every superstar. The origins of the NXT title is probably the best thing you want to pick from 2012. And yeah, you could show like Big E winning the title or Bo Dallas or whatever, but I wouldn't really put that in because it's not necessarily like, I feel like picking Seth Rollins is really where you should start with that. So now that we've decided Jinder versus Seth will be our first match in 2012 NXT for the inaugural NXT title, we skip ahead to 2013. This was also another year where there was the bare beginnings of the new brand. There were great rivalries and great title changes, but 2013 at NXT was very much full of superstars who were failing on the main roster and just filling the cracks down in NXT. They were falling down to fill the cracks. Guys like Alex Triple H Riley, Mason Ryan, Justin Gabriel, Tyson Kidd, Cesaro, Brodus Clay, etc. There was even legends like William Regal who were on the show at first just to put over new guys. And whilst new guys like Xavier Woods, Oliver Gray, Adrian Neville, CJ Parker, Corey Graves, Rusev, Sasha Banks, Sami Zayn, Paige were all making their names. They were making their names, but they weren't huge names yet. And so for me, if I was picking a match from 2013 NXT, it'd be one of the best matches of 2013 NXT, and it would be Sami Zayn versus Cesaro in a 2 out of 3 falls match in August 2013. This was one of the first like big buzzworthy matches of NXT. This was one of them when it was like everyone was like, oh, oh, this is NXT, alright, I'm gonna start paying attention a bit more to this, because there were definitely people paying attention to NXT like before that, like obviously, but it was not nearly as buzzworthy as it was today, or like in its later years. And so this was one of them where it was like, oh, alright, is this what Cesaro's doing now? He's not on TV, he's down in NXT, putting on killer matches, okay. And whilst personally, I think that Sami Zayn and Cesaro had a better match the next year in 2014 at NXT Arrival, I think I'd put this 2013 match in the showcase instead, because it kind of shows the start of the rise of the underdog from the underground, and it shows Cesaro when he went back to NXT, and that was a great rivalry with, you know, Sami Zayn that he had. See, if it was up to me and I could bring back people who were in the older games and, you know, who aren't in WWE anymore just for the showcase, I would personally put AJ Lee versus Bayley in my NXT 2013 showcase match, because I love AJ Lee, she's one of my favorites of all time, and you could show the start of Bayley's like rise into popularity. But unfortunately we can't do that for obvious reasons, so I'm gonna go with Sami Zayn and Cesaro for the 2013 match. Now, in 2014, there were so many key moments for NXT, there were so many great matches. It was very hard to narrow down to these few matches that I picked, but here we go. I mean, from Kevin Owens' debut to the first NXT takeover to Finn Balor's debut as the Demon to Sami winning the title, Finn and Hideo versus the Ascension, which was a much more noteworthy match back then than what the Ascension are today, don't worry. But for the matches that I would pick for NXT in 2014 for the showcase are as follows. Neville versus Sami Zayn at NXT Evolution for the NXT title, aka the night Sami won the title. By including this match, you could also include the whole scene of Sami being held up and then Kevin coming out and turning on him. Also for 2014, I'd include Paige versus Emma for the NXT Women's Championship, because I think this is one of the earliest points of the start of a women's evolution. And these are two of my favorites of all time, and I know what you're thinking, oh, Emma isn't with the WWE anymore, but honestly, we've seen weirder cameos in WWE games. Like, remember back in 2011 when RVD was in the game and he was still like chasing the TNA World Championship? I'm sure they can probably get Emma to be like agree to be in a 2K showcase for at least a match. Although with that being said, as great as that match was and as much as I want to see it, this next one would probably be the pick if they picked a women's match for 2014 in an NXT Evolution Showcase, and that match is Natalya versus Charlotte at NXT TakeOver for the women's title finals. Bret Hart in the corner, Ric Flair in the corner, I mean, it writes itself. It is a match they would pick. Also, another match that I would pick from 2014 is Sasha versus Charlotte at our Evolution. Actually, wait a minute, I just noticed I said Neville versus Sami Zayn, but there's no way Neville would be in WWE, another WWE game, at least not for a while. Okay, yeah, so maybe they just do with a Sami winning the title, like it just cut to the end of the match where you don't see Neville or anything and he's being held up and then he gets attacked by Kevin Owens. That's probably what they do. They probably wouldn't include Neville, obviously. But now moving on to 2015, one of my absolute favorite years of NXT. In its 8-year history, between 2015 and 2016, my two absolute favorite years of the brand. I mean, just so many great matches, great debuts, great moments. It was so hard to narrow down 2015 and 2016, but here we go. Starting off with the most obvious, Sasha versus Bayley at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Obviously this match would be in there, there's no doubt. This is one of the best matches of 2015, one of the best matches in NXT history, and probably the best women's match in NXT history, honestly. But you could also go with Sasha versus Bayley at NXT TakeOver Respect, which was the 30-minute Iron Woman match. Another match I'd include from 2015 is Charlotte versus Sasha Banks versus Bayley versus Becky Lynch, the 4 horsewomen in a fatal 4-way. That'd be great to play through. You could unlock all the retro attires of all 4 horsewomen. I'd include Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch at TakeOver Unstoppable. I was debating on including Finn Balor versus Samoa Joe at TakeOver London, but I've decided that I'm not going to include that, and I'm going to include their TakeOver Dallas match instead, because I think that was the best match they had. Another match I'd include is quite an obvious one, but Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens at TakeOver Rival. And the final match from 2015 that I would include is Finn Balor versus Kevin Owens at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Although alternatively, you could include their match from Japan. I know that wasn't necessarily an NXT pay-per-view, but it is where Finn started the longest reign, the longest championship reign in NXT history, so I could see them doing something like that. And now for 2016 in the showcase, this one was a hard one to narrow down, because 2016 was my favorite year of NXT there's ever been, and it had so many great moments and matches. I mean, from Nakamura getting signed to having that great match with Sami Zayn to the moment of Nakamura debuting, Austin Aries, Finn Balor finishing off in NXT against Nakamura, the rise of the Revival and DIY having killer matches, the start of Asuka's reign against Bayley. I mean, I could go on. The first match I'd have from 2016 is Samoa Joe versus Finn Balor at NXT TakeOver Dallas. For the NXT title, Dallas was such a special night, like it was such a great takeover, probably my favorite there's ever been. And speaking of Finn Balor, I'd also have Nakamura versus Finn Balor in Finn's final NXT appearance. I mean, by that point, Finn was he was the face of NXT, the longest reigning champion, the face. He just lost his title. His call up to main roster was was imminent. It was such a special final moment, and so I'd go with Nakamura versus Finn in Finn's final NXT appearance just before the draft. The Revival versus the American Alpha in Dallas, I'd also go with that. Nakamura versus Samoa Joe in Canada. Nakamura versus Sami Zayn at NXT TakeOver Dallas. Asuka versus Bayley at NXT TakeOver Dallas. And finally for 2016, the 2 out of 3 falls match, the Revival versus the DIY at TakeOver Toronto. One of the absolute best tag team matches I've ever seen. Now moving on to 2017, I don't know what it was about 2017, like it was a very good year I remember for NXT, but I had a much easier time picking out the matches for 2017. Don't really know why, but nevertheless, a bunch of great matches, and here's what I'd include in 2017 for the NXT Evolution Showcase. So for 2017, you could very well go with the DIY versus AOP in Chicago before Tommaso Ciampa turns on Johnny Gargano. You could go with Asuka versus Ember Moon at TakeOver Brooklyn 3, but the matches that I went with are NXT TakeOver War Games, the War Games match that included the Undisputed Era. I mean, the return of War Games, how are you not putting that in an Evolution Showcase? And plus, that wouldn't mean we'd get War Games in WWE 2K20, which I am all for. And honestly, I think they're very capable of doing it, it's just about if they actually do it. Plus the return of such a huge match type, how can you not talk about that in the evolution of NXT? Do you think 2013 NXT would have ever got the return of War Games? Hell no. Also from NXT TakeOver War Games, I'd pick Aleister Black versus the Velveteen Dream. Welcome to infamy, Velveteen Dream. Second to last, I'd pick Asuka versus Nikki Cross from NXT June 28th, the last woman standing match for the NXT Women's Championship. One of my favorite Asuka matches and probably my favorite Nikki Cross match. It was a great match. If you haven't watched it, I definitely advise you go watch it. It was fantastic. And finally from 2017, you already knew it was coming. Pete Dunne versus Tyler Bate in Chicago for the UK Championship. Arguably match of the year 2017, my personal match of the year for 2017. It was so damn good, and if you want to talk about, you know, the eventual expansion in 2018 to NXT UK, I mean, it starts here with Pete Dunne and Tyler Bate stealing the show in Chicago. Now, for 2018, this year, what matches would I pick for an NXT Evolution Showcase? Well, honorable mentions go to the Undisputed Era versus Mustache Mountain, which was at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn this year. Also honorable mentions to the other Gargano Ciampa matches that I don't mention. Kyle O'Reilly versus Pete Dunne for the UK title in June 2018 on an episode of NXT TV. And finally, Aleister Black versus Andrade Cien Almas. Those are all honorable mentions, but ones that won't make the cut into the showcase. So the most obvious match to pick from this year is the first 5-star match in like 7 years, or at least for WWE, and that is Andrade Cien Almas versus Johnny Wrestling in Philadelphia for the NXT title. Another match from Philly that I'd pick in the showcase is Aleister Black versus Adam Cole Baker. Up next, I'd pick the ladder match for the inaugural NXT North American Champion. This is an obvious pick because it's the start of a new championship in NXT. How do you not talk about that? Another match I'd pick from New Orleans is the triple threat tag team match for the NXT Tag Team Championships, of course, where Roderick Strong joins the Undisputed Era, and it was also for the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic Trophy. A very infamous moment in NXT, Roderick Strong turning his back on Pete Dunne. I'd pick the unsanctioned match between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa in Orlando. This was my personal favorite of the entire rivalry, and whilst that rivalry is probably not done, I think this is the one I'd pick, and this is my favorite match of the entire thing. I'd also pick Ricochet versus the Velveteen Dream from Chicago too, because goddamn, I want those sweet attires. Aleister Black versus Johnny Gargano from just recently at War Games 2. And finally, the two matches that I would 100% pick for 2018, because you could perfectly talk about the expansion into the UK, is 1, the Royal Albert Hall match, Mustache Mountain versus the Undisputed Era for the NXT Tag Team Championships, where Mustache Mountain won. I think it was an absolute killer match. It's one of the best matches of this year, and you know, it takes place in the UK, and it was fantastic. I mean, you just gotta love British wrestling, haven't you? And finally, I'd pick the 6-man tag match that took place in the UK, the Undisputed Era against British Strong Style. Another killer match that weekend. So that is where this episode of the WWE 2K20 wishlist comes to an end. I do hope you all enjoyed it. Unfortunately, the reason I'm doing an outro like this is because the actual outro I recorded for this decided to corrupt, and so that footage was unusable, and essentially I'm just re-recording it. I would have re-recorded it with my face, but the lighting situation in the UK right now is not very good. It's pretty dark and gloomy, pretty early on in the day, and all day really, and it's raining, so it's pretty disgusting right now. And also one more quick thing, today as I'm recording this little voiceover, the new moves DLC pack has came out for WWE 2K19, so we'll probably make a couple videos on that, just reacting to like the new moves and everything, and then we'll do like a little showcase of them, similar to how I did with the Titans DLC, and then next month we're gonna have the Rising Stars pack, which I am very excited for. And so yeah, if you have stuck around this far in the video, then let me know down in the comments. I really do appreciate people who stick around for the whole video. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, have a great rest of your day, leave a like as it always helps me out as more YouTubers, subscribe and turn on post notifications to keep posted, and yeah, thank you so much for watching, have a great rest of your day, and that's been it. Peace. And honestly, one of the reasons I'm excited for Christmas is because my chair is falling apart. Like, I can't even really show you it, but it is like awfully like you pull it back too much and metal sticks. It's just a problem.